You guys are all set to go.
Thank you, Scott.
And
Good evening,
good evening.
everyone. Welcome to the Permanent Municipal Building Committee. It is 6:01, and I will do the roll call for the permanent members. Joe Harpy.
Here.
Raul Abraham.
Here.
And where am I? I'm missing somebody. Myself, Steve Woods.
Peter Mankey.
Oh, Peter Mankey. Sorry, Peter. All right.
Yeah, my video
and
doesn't.
I'll see a face.
Yeah, video doesn't work. So
Okay. And then the Chapman Street facilities members are Chris Ferry.
Here.
And Donald Brown.
here.
And also present with us is the town manager, as well as the architect from TLB, which is Mike Fortuna, correct? Jonathan, do you want to introduce Mike? And
Yeah, I think Mike, I think you're joined by other members of your team. Is that right?
They might have logged in on the public one instead of the panelist one, just to keep it streamlined.
Okay. Let's see if we can find them and upgrade them.
There's no attendees right now.
yeah, there's no attendees on that side.
Yeah, so welcome, Mike, and yeah, I guess dig in.
This is Chris from TLB
Okay.
Architecture here.
Hey, Chris.
Hey.
All right, we'll dive right in. I can share my screen, right?
Yes.
As soon as I figure out how, yours looks different than mine.
And it'd be nice if everybody used one platform, huh?
Yeah, oh, there it is. Yeah, sorry about that. All right. So thanks for having me. I'm Mike Fortuna with TLB. Chris Strange has joined me. We kind of took a look at a bunch of things out here, but the purpose of the overall study is to do a conditions assessment, hazardous materials inspection, phase one environmental analysis, and some reuse planning. We finished up our field work, 3 rounds of field work about a week ago. And so what we're prepared to speak to tonight is a conditions assessment, hazardous materials in phase one. We have not gotten into the reuse planning yet. We've got to schedule some meetings with some stakeholders to get to that piece of planning study. But we have enough information to present the rest of it today. Ultimately, the study will, look at all of that, plus the reuse planning and cost estimating. So just by way of orientation, I'm sure you all know the building well, but it's essentially a 2-bay 1920s vintage firehouse. The south bay is a shorter bay with a room behind it and a small toilet room. And then the north bay is a deeper bay, narrower but deeper. That was added at some point later. We think about the 50s, looking at all the aerial mappings going back to the 30s. Feels like that north wing showed up somewhere between the 1934 aerial and the 1950 aerial. So there's not a lot of documentation on the history, although we just received the phase one environmental analysis, which goes through all the mapping that they were able to find. So we might be able to piece it together from that. We just haven't had the opportunity yet. So there's an attic over the South Bay. The South Bay is 2 different levels, you'll see in the photos, but there's an attic over both of them. And then the North Bay is that flatter roof portion with no attic. You can see in the roof plan, there's gables, and it drops down several feet to another ridge. Then this is the membrane roof on the north side. So just by way of orientation, the front facing Chapman Street, got the 2 overhead doors, the gable, the cupola up top. The north side is just a simple masonry wall with 3 windows. Come around the back, you can see the stacked gables that I mentioned. There's a chimney in here. It's a little unclear what was ever connected to that chimney, maybe a wood stove at one point, but all evidence of any connection to it on the interior has been plastered over or removed. There's a small little, excuse me, appendage on the back of the building where the boiler was. That appears to have been built in the 70s. And then as you come around the south side, you can see the two gables, cupola up top. So it's a pretty simple, nondescript building, but it is in the Newington Junction West Historic District. So our approach to any restoration or renovation is to follow the Department of Interior standards to restore, at a minimum, the exterior of the building. And then depending on how the building gets repurposed, that'll dictate a lot about what we do on the interior of the building. Because if it's going to ultimately be an occupied building, then we have to meet the energy code and we'll insulate to the inside. And so that'll change. If it's storage, where we don't have a conditioned space, then we just need to kind of put the inside back together. We don't necessarily need to change it. So the reuse planning will dictate a lot of that. And then the building sections. So this is standing in the building, looking back out towards Chapman Street. You've got the gable with the attic above, and then you've got the flat roof portion. And these are cut through the building, through the gable side and through the flat roof side. So architecturally, the building is structurally sound, but all of the elements need work. So the brick needs to be thoroughly cleaned and repointed. There's a lot of broken bricks that need to be replaced. Grade has changed over the years. So a lot of the brick that was at the bottom of the wall is now buried in the ground. And so there's a lot of damp rise coming up. The masonry joints are like a sponge, so they're just soaking up the moisture. And that's created some problems around the base. And I'll show you photos of all these. And I'm going to just, parenthetically, I'm going to go kind of quickly through these, but if you want me to dwell on any particular portion of it, just let me know. But I'm going to give you kind of the overview of everything, and then we can go back and discuss in more detail, whatever you'd like to. So I think, some regrading to get the earth down to the foundation level, and then probably put in a stone low strip around it to wick some water away from those masonry walls. All of the steel lintels are starting to rust. Some are worse than others, but they all need to be cleaned and coated with a high performance coating. One of the unfortunate things is the lintels came up a little short. They don't come out to the edge of the wall. And so there's some exposed brick on the underside with cells. Structurally not a problem, but you're getting bees and things up in those. So I think a reuse plan would probably patch those cores in the brick to get rid of all the beehives. The roofs require complete replacement. The membrane roof over the north bay is pulled away from the parapet, so it's open. The interior bay is completely open to the weather right now. And then the asphalt roof I don't think it's leaking. There's a lot of missing shingles, but it's at the end of its life and needs to be replaced. Windows and doors, all the windows and most of the doors are original, and they're in decent shape, so those can be restored. This front door has been replaced with a steel door, so in a restoration plan, it would be good to replace that with a more historically accurate door. The overhead doors are not original, but they're functional. So, the original doors, at least on the gable, was probably a bifold or some other form of door that doesn't make a lot of sense for, a municipal storage facility right now. But again, once we do the reuse planning, we can look at options for that. But those two doors are a large architectural element that historically, have an impact on the way the building looks. So we'll have to talk more about that as we get into planning. All the interior finishes need complete refurbishment and replacement. And the cupola is in good shape but needs to be restored. Some wood patch, some shingle replacement, and paint, basically. The copper at the top of the cupola is in pretty good shape, as is the weather vane. So there's probably not much, if anything, we need to do there. I mean, the good news is the building's small enough that none of these things are, you know, a huge capital investment to put it back together. So just walking around the building, you could see, you know, it's pretty much intact. There's a very distinct line. So most of the records show that this whole area was built at the same time. We suspect that was not the case, because there's a vertical joint in the masonry and the brick is actually a different color. We'll see a better picture of it. So we think
So
they were
I'm
both
sorry
built
to
in
interrupt.
20. So
I'm sorry to interrupt if I could just
Yeah.
chime in.
sure.
Yes, that lower gable section was added on after the original structure was built. And to answer your question about that chimney, that's the original chimney for the heating system from the original
Sure.
building. So that
Okay.
structure's had 2 additions put on it.
Okay. Yeah, that's what it felt like, just kind of looking at the assemblies. But
Yeah.
we weren't able to date exactly when this went on, but it feels like, you know, before 1934, because the flyovers in the 30s show that wing.
Okay.
So it happened pretty quickly after you opened. But again, you know, we just got the phase 1 environmental, which has all of that mapping in it. So we'll be able to dissect that and piece it all together in the final report. But the building as it stands today, even with the north wing and this 70s appendage, they're all in the historic district as a contributing structure. Nobody at SHPO is gonna be too upset if that goes away. But the rest of it is part of the contributing structure to the district. So, but these are just some images of some of the brick damage. You know, there's cracks, there's some broken brick that's, you know, open to the interior wise. It's a triple white brick wall, so it's a solid unreinforced masonry wall. So there's row locks that tie the brick layers together, but there's no masonry ties like you would have in a modern wall. So this wall is just solid brick and mortar for 12 inches. There's a lot of broken brick, probably from freeze thaw with some damaged mortar, took on some water, freeze thaw, spalled the face of the brick off. This is the damp rise I was mentioning, where earth is pushed right up against the brick. And so those joints are just wicking water up like a sponge. These are the damaged lintel. They're starting to rust. This is one of the better ones. You can also see the windows are all intact and in pretty good shape. This is more of the damp rise issue. So once water gets wicked up and then freezes and thaws, that's where you start damaging your brick. So if we pull grade down a little bit, get a stone trench in there, or maybe even there's a storm, we'll see in a minute, there's a storm drainage manhole right behind the building. So we could put in a French drain, get water out of there and protect the brick. Entire property is less than 1/4 of an acre. So, you know, again, it's not a lot of money to run these pipes and dry that site out. Drainage is pretty good around the building. We'll look at the site. This is more of the brick damage. The higher you go, the worse it gets. So this is the chimney on the north wing. And it's in really tough shape. This is the one that's connected to the fireplace. It's in really tough shape. The flue is kind of chewed up, but bricks are falling off of it. You can see one on the ground, on the roof. The one in the original building is in a little bit better shape, but still has a missing brick. So that brick restoration, chimney caps, that's all absolutely necessary work in order to preserve the building. Up on the roofs, the membrane roof has a parapet. It's got a little steeper than 1/4 of an inch per foot pitch from the Chapman Street facade to the back of the building where there's a gutter. We can increase that to probably 1/2 inch per foot, get better drainage. But the whole thing needs to be replaced. It's completely pulled away from the parapet and open to the interior. There's a terracotta wall cap that for the most part is in pretty good shape and needs to be repointed. There's a few that are broken, like you see here. Those are just the face of the terracotta is actually this. It's just popped off from freeze thaw. So those need to be repointed and a few need to be replaced. And then the shingle roof is a pretty standard shingle roof, nothing special there. All right, windows and openings. You can see the windows are intact. Would be the way you would do a historic restoration on these windows is you'd take the sash out, take them to a shop, reglaze them, strip them down, paint them, and then you'd restore the frames in place and put it all back together. If it's an occupied building where you're trying to control temperature, often we'll put an exterior storm panel on these, sometimes in the interior, but then you get some weird conditions. So, again, the reuse planning is necessary before we look at something like that. But in any scenario, there's not too many windows, but they're all there, original and in good shape. This louver, I'm not sure what happened to it, but it needs to be replaced, obviously. Somehow it took a beating. The woodwork on the front facade and the transom window is original, can be restored. This is the door that was replaced with a steel door at some point. So, that in a historic restoration, you'd replace that. This is the back door, which is probably what the front door used to look like. So we could buy that commercially now as a new door to match that. Woodwork is, most of it's in surprisingly good shape. This gable return is pretty much a bird's nest at this point, but the other side is in good shape. So restoring all the woodwork would be pretty simple. And then the cupola, some shingle replacements. It'll get reflashed when the new roof goes on. The rest of it is just scrape, prime, and paint. It's all in pretty good shape. On the interior, they're pretty sparse interiors, as you might imagine. We'll look at the hazmat report, but all this vinyl tile is asbestos, so that all needs to get abated. This is the north wing, the longer, narrower bay looking back out towards Chapman Street. There's not a lot going on in here. It's masonry on the interior. So the north wing is concrete block, south wing is the brick. So it's a load-bearing masonry wall in both cases, but one's concrete, one's brick. And then there's giant steel lintels, steel beams that serve as lintels over the openings between the bays. Wood framed roof, so there's built up 2x beams and 2x joists that have a plywood deck and then the membrane. Most of the plywood deck has seen water damage, so I think we're probably going to have to strip that down to the framing and re-roof it, but that gives us the opportunity to put in a good solid deck and then tapered insulation to get maximum pitch to the back of the site. And then this is looking the other way towards the fireplace. Fireplace is in the back in the corner. The one thing that's of some concern, which we'll talk about on the environmental assessment, is there's a trench drain in here. And the outlet to that is not known. We assume it goes to sanitary sewer, but we don't know that for sure. So I don't see any reason, regardless of what the reuse planning ultimately ends up being, I don't see a scenario where that stays in place. That probably gets capped and filled. Because if you have a trench drain in a building and you've got vehicles, you need oil water separators and which if you need it, it can be done, but if you don't need it, it's easier to just get rid of it. And then this is the other bay, the original bay. This picture is standing in the doorway, the overhead doorway, looking back towards the back wall. Again, pretty sparse interiors. The interior of the brick has been poured out and plastered. And then the floors are concrete slabs in various conditions. There's a lot of cracks and all fixable, but you know, again, if it's storage, you don't need to do much. If you're going to try and put people in the building, then you're going to have to do some more. This is the kind of office toilet area in the back. It's being used for storage now for presumably emergency management. There's cots and blankets and things in there. This is that back door, the original back door that I mentioned. There's a scuttle access up to the attic. And there's a pull down stair that I didn't trust my weight on it. So if you're going to keep that, it should get replaced. But you know, again, it's just kind of beaten up space, but it's wide open. The toilet room has been, all the fixtures have been disconnected. The toilet is in a room. The sink is outside the room. It's all been disconnected. The water service is turned off to the building. So, you know, if we put the bathroom back in, we're probably taking down the walls and making it, you know, an accessible toilet room to modern standards. Okay, structural elements. The roofs over the original South Bay are wood frame gable roofs, dimensional lumber, sitting on masonry bearing walls. Both the front portion and the back portion. They're built the same way, just one's higher than the other. The North Bay, they're wood beams, wood joists sitting on concrete masonry. In the middle, between the two bays, both roofs are bearing on the original brick wall that used to be the exterior of the single bay garage. That's now the interior demising wall between the two bays. But both wings sit on that wall. And then the openings are steel beams serving as long lintels. And it's all in pretty good shape. There's some minor repairs that are needed, but there's nothing of any particular concern that can't be easily repaired. So the slabs are, you know, they're just tired. It's been a firehouse for a long time. And so there's some cracks, stains, that sort of thing, which, you know, again, if there's storage, no big deal. If it's occupied, you're going to have some finished floor go in there. The steel lintels, you can best see it in this bottom. So they're pretty sizable steel beams, but the underside are starting to corrode. That would all get cleaned up and a high performance coating put on it to protect it. You can see that's actually exterior concrete block wall, the beam sitting on it, then the joists sit on the beams. And then up at the top, this is that parapet with the failed roof membrane. Sorry for the grainy photo. I pasted them in right from the study. We got the structural engineers info just recently. Mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. There's not much going on there, despite the fact that this is the longest list we've looked at, but the domestic water has been shut off. So it enters, there's a closet between the two bays. The water service comes into that closet from the Chapman Street side, turns up, and has been disconnected. And so if we're going to reactivate water, you know, we'll have to test that line. It's been abandoned for a number of years to make sure underground is still in good shape, and then probably strip out all the plumbing from the building and start fresh. It's all not in great shape. There's a 4-inch buried sewer line that leaves the building to the rear of the property. We're not 100% sure where it goes. but it functions, so it's tied into the sanitary sewer somewhere. So the site study we got probably traced that out, so we'll know by the time we finish the study, but I don't know right now where it goes. There's a high pressure natural gas service to the building. There's a regulator at the service train that regulates it down to low pressure in the building, and the only thing that that's serving right now is a single unit heater in the North Bay. The old gas service that used to come in from the Chapman Street side has been deactivated. So the only gas to the building is coming in from the rear of the building. Toilets and sinks have been disconnected and are inoperable. The trench drain I mentioned in the South Bay should probably go away. If you decide you need it, then we need to trace it out, see where it's going. But there's no indication that there's an oil water separator on site. So depending on what you put in the building, you might need one. I don't think you're going to do maintenance in the building. And if it's just storage, you probably don't need one, but it's not something that we should overlook. Because you could end up in an environmental concern there. Not too long ago, within the last, I'll say, handful of years, a new 100 amp service was installed, electrical service. The former one was disconnected, the fuse box abandoned. It's all still there, but it's been disconnected and abandoned in place. Each bay door is a 0.5 horsepower opener. There's kind of old lighting, fluorescent tube type lighting that in any reuse plan would get converted to LED fixtures. There's a bunch of outlets, receptacles throughout the building, general 110 power. The boiler, hydronic ceiling heater, and fin tube radiation has all been deactivated and abandoned. The only heat in the building is that single unit heater. And there's a couple of propeller type exhaust fans. We couldn't get them to operate. So I don't know if they're just disconnected. We checked the breaker panel. I'm not sure they're connected anymore. But, again, it's all based on the reuse planning, how much exhaust you need in the building. So those probably don't have a life beyond this renovation. So this is the water service I mentioned coming in. Chapman Street is to the right in this photo. And then it's just disconnected from there. This is the high pressure gas service, the unit heater, there's the propeller fans. And then this is the hydronic heat that used to heat the bay from the boiler. That's been disconnected and is no longer functioning. And then this is the boiler, which sits in this appendage. The only thing the boiler is keeping warm now is a bunch of mice. So I don't see any reason to hang on to that. We could take the boiler, all the breaching out, take that wing down and clean up the back of the building. This is a new electrical service, comes in underground from a pole near the street to a new breaker panel. You have a lot of spares in the panel, but with a 100 amp service, it doesn't necessarily mean you have a lot of capacity in the service. Pretty small service. So for storage, it's fine. For some other use, it might not be. And this is all the abandoned stuff. So you've got, that's the original service, the fuse box abandoned. This is your telephone punch down. It doesn't seem like there's an active phone line in the building right now. Unless somehow it sneaks out of this rat's nest to go someplace. But we couldn't find one. And then you've got a fire alarm button, the overhead door button, and regular light switches. So pretty light electrical service, not a lot going on there. Site elements. So it's in a residential zone. Municipal facilities, according to your zoning regulations, are exempt from zoning with some exceptions. One of the exceptions is if you abandon the building. So don't abandon the building. And then the parcel size I mentioned is only, less than 1/4 of an acre. There, you're in a FEMA zone X, so not a huge concern there. The western portion of the site right around here is in an upland review area. So if you do any grading or rework, then you'll have to go to the wetlands for upland review. The parcel's not large enough to trigger any, deep sort of reviews, the 1 acre limit. So you'll be okay there. Drainage works pretty well. The building's got kind of a natural swale that runs both sides of the building. It connects to storm sewer in Chapman Street, which then discharges to a DOT system in Willard Avenue and then out to Piper Brook. So we see no reason to change any of that. If we regrade along the building to lower grade a little bit, we'll just have to make sure we maintain the swales, get water off the site. And then there's one storm manhole in the side yard near the parking lot to the residential property. That's picking up the roof leaders. But that's where we could tie in if we do some kind of French drain around the perimeter of the building to keep the bottom of the walls dry. We could tie right into this storm basin. So this is the wetlands I mentioned. This purple area is the upland review. And then the storm, that's that manhole we were just looking at. So the storm kind of runs through the site, connects out here on Chapman. And that's the extent of the underground utilities, except for the sewer line, which we don't know where it is. It comes out of the back of the building about here and goes someplace. So we'll have to track that down. All right, asbestos and lead. No surprise, there is some. Mostly in the flooring. There's some in, there was some kind of leveling compound on the concrete floors that came up hot. And then some of the caulking and flashing is also hot. There's lead paint, but it's not to a level where you've got to abate it. It's just lead paint awareness. So whoever's working on the building just needs to be aware it's there and take certain personal protections to avoid ingesting it. So I don't think there's any, I don't think anybody is surprised that there's asbestos in the building. There are a list of things that Bussin O'Neill identified as assumed PCBs. So they didn't test for PCBs because once you start testing, you start pulling on that thread. And so there are a few things that are assumed PCBs that would be handled, carefully during construction, but you don't need to go chasing it. And then the phase 1 environmental assessment, this is the listing of maps that I mentioned. So they go basically from 1934 to 2023. And so you can sort of figure out when things got it built by judging these maps. You could get time frames for these. So we'll chase all these through, piece together the sort of chronology of the building development, and have that information in the report. The good news is there's nothing that raised any particular concerns, so there's no need to go any further than the phase 1 assessment. The only issues that were identified that are really, planning and permitting issues, not environmental issues, the wetlands, which I mentioned, and then the floor, the trench drain in the floor. So it's a clean site. The history was well documented back to the 20s. There's never been any underground storage tanks. So there were no particular concerns identified in the phase 1 assessment. And then the National Register of Historic Places, I mentioned it's in the Junction West Historic District as a contributing building. So, there'll be SHPO reviews. If you have any local historic preservation committees or review boards, we would meet with them. But the jumping off point would be to follow the Department of Interior standards for rehabilitation of historic structures, which means that you don't take out anything you don't need to take out. You restore what's in place. You replace in kind where you have to replace something. This building is small enough that that's not a heavy lift. A couple of things that'll, there a couple of decisions that'll need to be made along the way are the overhead doors and how we treat those if we do anything different. And originally there was, let me go back to the beginning. A grainy picture, but the mismatched brick that you see under the round top window. Used to be a sign that said firehouse number 3. So, we'd either have to replace brick to match, which would be really hard to do and probably not look a lot better than that, or come up with a new sign, which is probably the better option and probably the less expensive option. But other than that, the brick restoration, the woodwork, windows and doors can all get restored. And then the interior, again, depending on how you're going to use the building, can get cleaned up and restored basically in its current, configuration, or it can get reconfigured for a new use. That's for another day. So that's what I have for you tonight. Happy to answer any questions or get into more detail on any of it.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Before I turn it over to the committee for questions, which I'm sure there's going to be some, Jonathan, is there anything that you want to add before we open it up to the committee members?
No, Steve, this is thing, and no, I defer to you guys.
Okay. All right, then I'll open it up to the floor. Who would like to go first?
If I may.
You sure can, Don.
So I just want to confirm with Mike, there were no structural issues. There's no problem with the foundation. So
Nothing significant. There's some water damage on the north bay where the water's been leaking.
right.
There's some dislodged bracing up in the floor joist,
Mhm.
but nothing significant.
Okay. And I have a question for Jonathan, actually. In Mike's presentation, he kept saying or referring to, depending on what the building's going to be used for. So how do we answer that question?
Well, we don't. I mean, what we've sort of decided is, and this is from council down to everybody, is that we're focused on renovating a structure, not worrying about its end use. As time goes on, that might change, but I think the marching orders for this committee right now are to focus on renovating the structure first, and then the specifics later. So I know that's an incomplete answer because, on some level, Donald, like if, the fire department might need, X, Y, and Z, whereas the town might need A, B, and C, but I think those kind of modifications could come, subsequent to the structural repair of the building.
Okay. I'm asking the question because it seems like Mike and his team kind of need that answer to help determine what needs to be done to the building. That was the impression I got based on this presentation.
Yeah, so if I could just speak to that, the ultimate use plan will define the ultimate build out. But to Jonathan's point about preserving the asset, we could do the envelope restoration, get you a structurally sound, weather tight building. And then you could decide what to do with it anytime. So I didn't mean to imply that we're talking about some range of uses that it's just we haven't gotten there yet. We're just on the condition side of things. So if you tell us you want to turn it into, a wedding venue, that's going to be different than if you tell us you want to just make it storage. But that's kind of the interior renovation and the MEP systems. The restoration of the building itself can happen regardless of those end uses.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Steve,
Yes, Joe.
I would agree with Don Brown on this. I think there's been a lot of discussion about storage, not, at least that's what I've heard repeatedly done. And whoever has to make the decision on the scope of this project and then have that scope reviewed by the Permanent Building Committee, I think would make the most sense. And if the need is storage and the fire department wants to put a vehicle in there at one point in time, I believe, in one of the bays, then it would seem from a time element standpoint and from an economic standpoint in terms of cost, it would make sense to have us an upfront scope that the council has to come together on, or not come together on, but make an effort to develop a scope so that we would have a sense of what we would offer as a recommendation on what has to be done. Because I would also agree with Mr. Brown. He's hearing the same thing I am. Maybe we're all hearing it, that there's going to be a significant differential in cost as storage versus going in and making a new meeting room and things along those lines, which are obvious to all of us. And the other last part of my question is this building on the historic register or not?
Yeah, it's part of an historic district, so it's not individually listed, but it's listed as a contributing structure within a historic district on the
Okay.
National Register of Historic Places.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Steve.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Raul?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions. Mike, you talked about roof replacement. When we replace a roof, do we have to bring it up to the current code for insulation? And the concern that I saw, low
Yeah, only if
parapets.
it's an occupied building. If it's storage,
Okay.
then there's an exception in the code for I forget exactly what the term is, but low energy buildings, I think is the term. So that unit heater to keep it at 50 degrees would not trigger the energy code.
Okay, perfect. The second question, I believe the task also included assessment of the pavement outside the driveway. Does that need replacement or any
It's
other?
Yeah, it's part of the site report. You'll see it when we deliver it, but there's cracks up to 1/4 of an inch, lots of them. So a mill and repave makes sense. We don't know what the subsoil condition is, but it's relatively stable, just cracked and falling apart. So the subsoils are probably in pretty good shape. But I think a mill and repave or complete repave is probably a wise thing to do. You don't want to spend a bunch of money restoring a building and have the front yard look like, a bomb hit it.
I agree. And the last question, or maybe a comment, I'm sure estimate, that's something that they're still working on, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're not there yet, but we have the information now to get to our estimator. So
Okay,
we'll
perfect.
start on that together.
You're all set, Raul?
Yes, I'm all set.
Okay,
Thank you.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I want to go back to actually Donald's line of questioning, because I think he does raise a very valid point, and I'd like to get Mike's sort of take on this. So, to the extent to which we use it as, let's say, a passive facility, meaning storage, that kind of thing, as opposed to an active facility, meaning meeting rooms, somehow, I don't exactly know, workspace, etc. At a high level, can you generalize about what we would be required to have in an active space versus a passive space from a building code standpoint? Would there, for example, have to be additional bathrooms, additional egresses, those kind of things that could potentially cause the project cost to, to go up 25, 30, 50%.
Yeah, there are definitely added costs to occupy them. So you say passive and active, the code looks at it as occupied and unoccupied. So if you're putting stuff in the building, then you don't need to do a whole lot. If you're putting people in the building, depending on the use, you're going to need to meet the energy code, which is going to be probably a 6 or 7 inch insulated assembly inside the building, because you can't do it outside. You're going to have insulation at the roof level. Of the gable side, you can do it at the attic floor, so not a big deal. On the flat roof side, you're going to have to build up several inches, maybe 10 to 12 inches of rigid insulation, which is going to put you right at the bottom of that parapet, maybe even a little above it. So there's some complications associated with that. You're going to need increased ventilation, heating, air conditioning, fire alarms, depending on the use, maybe sprinklers. So it does ratchet it up to, it's a whole different order of magnitude. And so, it's probably not 25%, it's probably more like 50 to 75% additional cost.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think that, that's an important sort of question for the committee to wrestle with. And, I don't have guidance there, but obviously, our budget is, at this point, is fairly modest. So I'll just leave it at that for now and defer to the committee.
Yeah. I'm going to jump in here for a minute, because I think we're in agreement that the building is going to be used for storage. Now, define storage. So, I'm going to use the fire department to start off. The fire department, if they're going to put vehicles in there, they more than likely need to be a conditioned space, right? It has to be above 45 degrees. So, no one will be working in there, but we can't have the trucks freeze. So we'd have to have some sort of heat. Like the question, I don't know if, do we add or renovate that bathroom? Or do you just take it out and it is just storage space? And that's something I suppose we can go back to the council with options at some point. But again, I like the way that you kind of broke this apart. We can do all this exterior work and get the building back into a solid position, and then try to figure out how we're going to use that space. We're not adding on to it. It is pretty much been determined. I believe the message was clear from the council and the direction we've been getting from the town staff that it's storage. And again, fire department will definitely need some sort of heated space, not 75, 80 degrees or air conditioned, but just to keep their equipment from freezing in the wintertime. And again, I think that bathroom is the only question. Weigh out the dollars, because it would have to be now ADA compliant, I'm assuming. Yeah, okay. But again, and I know there was some talk about changing the roof line on that flat roof, but if I'm hearing you correctly, we really can't do that, correct? We have to leave it the way it is?
Yep.
Yeah, it has to remain a flat roof.
You're going to change the pitch.
We can make it a steeper pitch as long as we stay within the parapet height. So the issue there is the historic designation. So, they're not SHPO and National Trust, they're not regulatory, they're advisory. But what'll happen is if when you sort of signed up for the historic district, you as a community took on the responsibility of maintaining that, because people probably got tax credits and other things that they would then lose the ability to start renovating buildings outside the Department of Interior's standards, then some of those things might be in jeopardy. Not past tax credits, future tax credits.
Yep. Okay. And again, for me, I think I'd love to be able to drive down Willard Avenue when we're done with this, and it looks like the old Company 3 is back open again for business from the exterior. And it could be just storage inside. I think that's really nice, and I think we have the ability to do that. So again, I think you've given us a lot. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when we do the cost estimating, there'll be enough line items in there so you can see what it costs to add a bathroom, and then
okay, that would be good.
at that point.
that would be good. Then we could take that to the council. Chris, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think you hit my question around the roof line. I mean, I know it's a historic building, but that was an add-on. Does that still fall under those guidelines? Or, because there was some talk of a solution to put a pitched roof rather than a flat roof.
Yeah, it's a contributing structure in its current configuration. So that flat roof wing was there when it got registered. So,
Yep.
And it's over 50 years old, which is kind of the threshold for historic buildings review.
And I guess the other question I have is, if from the aesthetic point of view, having two garage doors, that's always going to have to stay that way. So to Steve's point, it's going to look like an existing firehouse or an old firehouse. But we're not going to be able to close those in for storage. It's going to have to remain bay doors that open up, right?
Yep. So, we could discuss when the time comes what those bay doors look like. So they don't necessarily need to be the steel overhead doors like you have now. They could be, what was probably there was some sort of a bifold arrangement originally, kind of like the one over near Town Hall.
Yeah, like Company
The
One.
museum. Yeah.
The old Company One.
Yep.
Yeah. Alan, before I get to you, let me just ask if Peter or Stanley has anything to add in.
No, I'm happy the way it is. Like I said, my own opinion, I think we do need a bathroom in there. You never know, people have to take a whiz or whatever. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Stanley. Peter?
Yeah, well, my question was, I mean, I think if we have to make it storage, because if you're gonna do the envelope of this building, you gotta do something with those front doors, the overhead doors. And the overhead doors, if it's gonna be a meeting room, you don't need the overhead doors. So I think as long as we're leaning to the storage, then we can finish the outside and make it structurally sound and continue from there.
Yeah, again, I don't want to say we box ourselves into a corner, but I think those two front doors the openings are gonna stay. We can decide what kind of decorative door we have, but those doors are there forever, which leads to obviously the use of this building more towards storage. And again, we need to, define that a little bit further as we move forward here, but it's going to be storage.
Yeah, and that allows us to do the envelope.
Correct. Yeah.
Yep.
Don?
So again, this is back to the bay doors and whatnot and the windows and so forth. I'm assuming whatever restoration we do to this structure, it's going to also lean towards the easy to maintain side also, so that the building doesn't fall into disrepair like it has. I would think that would be part of our goal.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have brick and paint on wood is pretty much, the asphalt roof, you all have to think about for 25 years. The membrane roof, you don't have to think about for 15 to 20 years. But there will be paint maintenance. The eaves are 10 feet, the ridge is 19, so it's not like you're setting up staging to do it, but it's paint on wood. So there is some maintenance associated with that you're not going to get away from.
And Mike, when we get the brick back into good shape, we could also conceal the brick, correct? So that'll buy us some time and try to slow down the water penetration.
Yeah, sealing historic brick is tricky. It can be done, but it's unpredictable at best. So what happens is, what we would have to do is take a couple of brick out of the building, have them tested for porosity and strength, and then create a mortar that's a little bit less strong than the brick, so that the mortar is sacrificial. And when you seal it, sometimes you end up damaging the brick because you're really sealing the mortar, not the brick.
Okay.
And so
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. So you got to. There are ways.
Cut you off.
No, I was just saying there are ways of doing it. There's siloxane type breathable coatings that can help, but they have to be reapplied every 2 to 5 years.
Okay.
Depending on the exposure.
Yep. Okay.
So
go ahead, Don.
My follow-up is So you said, restore the windows and whatnot. We wouldn't be able to replace them with historically accurate, for lack of a better phrase, um,
No,
less
not,
maintenance-y kind of windows?
no, not if you're gonna follow the Department of Interior standards. That's a choice. You know, it's just before you make that decision, you have to see what the downstream implications of that decision might be. Not just for you, but for all the neighbors that are in that district.
So if we were to set a precedent of not following those Department of Interior regulations, that could then give the neighbors to follow that lead in the future? Is that what you're saying?
So if somebody bought a structure in the district and wanted to restore it and take tax credits and some of the other incentives to do so, if buildings within the district are not following the standards, you could put those at risk. So it could have an impact on future development in the district.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have anything else before we move on?
Steve, can I add one quick thing?
Sure, go ahead, Joe.
Once if we agree to do the envelope of the building, I personally, I don't like two-phase projects, and I think if we're gonna do that, and we've decided tonight this is for storage, we should just go ahead and push in that direction. Because we'll be into the winter months before we know it, unfortunately, trying to do some construction and work on that building. So I would prefer to see one phase, one, whatever works out with the council, unless the council does a 360 on us and decides to do something more expensive. I don't see that coming down the road. We've all heard storage, right? From the day of Connecticut K-9, the second floor was going to be storage. So storage seems to be a hot topic in the town. And, but I also heard the fire department recommend that they were going to want to put a vehicle, at least one in there, in the Bay Area. So I think,
We would like to have both.
I'm sorry,
I said, honestly, we need to have both.
right, good.
So a vehicle
I
in the
agree.
building is storage. It's considered storage.
Don't like to get into phases. I think it's gets
Yeah,
more expensive in a hurry.
Yeah,
Right.
I think what was really being discussed now is, you know, who occupies that building and has control of it, and that's to be honest with you, that's we don't have that charge, this committee. So that's between the town manager's office, the board of fire commissioners, and whoever the facilities director. They'll make those decisions, and they'll come to some sort of conclusion.
And I would hope the
But
fire
Chris-
department has a big voice in it, to be honest with you.
And I think they definitely will, especially with, you know, we have this happening right now, so we're displacing some of their equipment already. And hopefully company 4 passes in referendum, and that's going to start. So we're going to displace even more equipment. So they're going to need space for the next 18 months to 2 years. And again, Jonathan is well aware, and I'm sure they'll be able to work it out between the chief, the board of fire commissioners, and all the players in town. So
I agree with you, Steve, because when the facility manager gave us that presentation, he mentioned the fire department. It's in these, absolutely.
I agree with Joe that
hey, you're all broken up, Stanley.
sorry. I agree with Joe. I don't know what happened, Steve.
Okay, we got you agree with Joe, and that's pretty much it, I believe.
Yes.
Okay. Mike, let me go back to you. How much time will you need to get back to us now for the next phase of this on your part?
So we've got the conditions assessment pulled together. We need to get it into our, we need to establish a recommendation to get it into the estimator's hands. So I would say we're probably a month away from a final report. But we could start feeding better information in terms of costs, so you can do some decision making in the interim.
Okay.
In the next
Then again, I
couple of weeks.
would ask you to coordinate that with the town manager, and we'll schedule meetings according to your schedule to try to help you out. If there's anything you need, we can obviously meet, to make that work out for you, okay?
Yeah, we had a big push over the last few weeks, so I think we have everything we need, but, yeah, I appreciate the offer. If something comes up, we'll let you know.
Okay. All right, Jonathan, anything else you have? You good?
No, yeah, I have nothing else.
Okay. Next item, public participation, and I don't think, we don't have anybody. We have approval of prior meeting minutes. Excuse me. We have one, and that date is, and in a second, let me pull it up. April 2nd, 2026. If someone would like to move that.
Would
I'll make
move
a
it.
motion, we approve.
Thank you,
Second.
Peter, and a second by Don.
Donald. Yep.
Okay, second by Don Brown. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Back to my agenda. Any other business pertinent to the committee? Back to public participation. We still have none. Comments by members. I think we're commented out. Gail, I skipped over you. You are considered a member of the public. Is there anything you want to add? I don't want to cut you off. Just shake your head yes or no. No, you're good. You're muted. You're good. Okay. Motion to adjourn then.
So moved.
Motion made by Don Brown. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you, everyone. We stand adjourned. It is 7:02. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mike, thank you very much.